What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Thursday, November 16th edition of the NBA Lineup Generator video. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. We only have two NBA games tonight. The NBA not trying to compete with the NFL, even though the NFL's product is obviously terrible. So we only have two games, not a ton to talk about, but we can still use the lineup generator to see how we're attacking the slate early on in the day. And one nice thing about only having two games is this video will have a little bit longer shelf life. I'm still certainly not recommending that you just take lineups from this video and play them in 5 hours or 4 hours, whatever it may be. But the way things look, it the slate should look more similar to the way it does right now by the time we get to lock than normal. We don't have a ton of injury news we're waiting on. Obviously, it's the NBA, so things could end up looking differently. But as always, we're going to walk through DraftKings and FanDuel using the lineup generator. But before we do that, hit the thumbs up button on YouTube, give it a like on Twitter, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell so you get notifications when all of our shows go live. Now, starting on the DraftKings side, if you're not familiar with the lineup builder, where you're going to walk through it, it is a tool that essentially utilizes all of our other tools. It uses our player projections, our ownership projections, our simulation models, and the end result is that it's going to present you with high quality lineups that we project to be profitable over a long period of time. And then you can go through those lineups and choose ones you like, the ones you don't like, kind of like swiping right or left on a dating app, and ultimately choose the lineups that you want to play in your tournaments. You also have some customization options that I'll walk through. And one of those first ones is choosing your ownership setting, the type of lineups that you want to see. I am going to go with contrarian lineups for this video. That's a good way to go if you're playing your large field tournaments. If you're playing smaller field, 3-max stuff, chalky or balanced is perfectly fine also. Or you can always just hit all lineups, see everything, and choose the ones that you like. I'm going with contrarian lineups for right now. And then here you have the option to lock in a player. I don't recommend doing that if you're playing multiple lineups. If you're playing 20 lineups, I don't think you need to lock somebody in. If they're a really good play, they're going to show up in a lot of the lineups that you get anyway. But maybe you're playing one lineup and you know that you want Chris Paul. So why not just save the time and make sure that every lineup that you see has Chris Paul in it? I'm going to skip that. And now we're going to take a look. You can see here that this is the first lineup generated. It gives you your salary, projected fantasy points, ownership at the top, shows you who's in the lineup, their individual ownership projections, and fantasy point projections. And then over here, this is one of the other customization options I was referring to. Let's say you get this lineup and you look, you're like, I absolutely love everybody in this lineup, but I don't like Brandon, I blank on his name every time. The backup guard on Golden State, and I don't like Kendrick Williams, or I don't like Kendrick Williams. Instead of having to go through all of the lineups and hope that you eventually get to one that looks just like this, or having to upload it to DraftKings and then go into DraftKings and change it there, you can simply just click on the right-hand side here, and Brandon Projeski is projected for 21.5% ownership, 20% or 20 fantasy points, 4,600. Because you use the max salary here, you know you have 4,600 that you can replace him with. So you just scroll down here. It's showing you all the shooting guards. You can make him Cason Wallace if you want. You can make him Caleb Martin. So you have the ability to customize your lineups that way as well. And then down here at the bottom, we have sliding scales because these projection numbers at the top, the fantasy points and the ownership, they don't mean anything by themselves. It's all relative to what your alternatives are. And so here you can see that this lineup projects very, very well, very close to the max fantasy points projection that you're going to get. And in terms of ownership, it's kind of middle of the pack. So I'm going to save the first 20 lineups that we get, and then we can look at the final stage here where you can see the exposures that you're getting to different players and potentially adjust that if you feel the need. So we're going to go to view saved lineups. And over here at the left, on the left, you have all of the individual lineups. Over here on the right, you have your player exposures. And like I said, I didn't lock Chris Paul for this, but he was in all 20 of those first lineups anyway, because he is just pretty clearly the best play on the slate tonight. $6,700 guard with no Steph Curry, should play a bunch of minutes, looks very, very good. Kevon Looney's in 95% of these lineups. Scherer is in 90%. Klay Thompson in 90%. So very, very heavy on Golden State, which is to be expected. The field is there as well. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, highest projected guy on the slate in 85% of these lineups. So that's one thing that it is going to stand out amongst these lineups. While these top 5 guys are all very popular, Chris Paul is projected to be the highest owned guy on the slate. Saric is second. Looney is third. Gilgeous-Alexander is 7th. And Klay Thompson is 4th. So the top 4 guys here are the top 4 projected owned guys on the slate. And then Shai is 7th. But one thing that gets overlooked when you talk about ownership is who you're not playing. Bam Adebayo is projected to be the 5th highest owned guy on the slate at 50% owned. He is only showing up in 10% of these lineups. Now, I'm not saying, that Bam's a bad player or anything like that. But that is something to keep in mind. If you're thinking, oh, well, you click contrarian lineups and everybody showing at the top is very popular. If you don't have Bam Adebayo in a lineup, you're already different than half the field. So it kind of minimizes how much more different you need to be. And it's also a 2-game slate. So there's only so many alternatives as well. You want to be careful, not just completely avoiding the best plays because you're trying to be contrarian. So I think that's a big takeaway from this as well. And then another customization option that you can use is when you look at these guys at the top, let's say, okay, I like all of these guys, but I don't want Andrew Wiggins to be in 55% of my lineups. I only want 40%. What you do, and this is out of 20 lineups, so each lineup is 5%. What you can do, you click Andrew Wiggins' name. He's all of the Andrew Wiggins lineups are now going to show up at the top, highlighted in yellow. And then you have two things you can do. You can either go into the lineup in each individual lineup. You can look at it, go down to Andrew Wiggins, like I showed you before, click the arrows, find a different forward at 5,100, or you can just go through the lineups, decide which ones you like the least. You have the fantasy point projection, you have the ownership projection, you have the players. So however you want to decide that, whatever metrics you want to use, find the 3 you like the least, and then just simply discard those lineups. So I'm going to discard 3 Andrew Wiggins lineups. Then you scroll down here, you go to get more lineups, go back, and then just look for lineups that don't have Andrew Wiggins. So that's one. That one has Wiggins. That one has Wiggins. No Wiggins in this one, and no Wiggins in this one. So now we can go back, and Andrew Wiggins is down to 40%. So very, very easy. And, you're still replacing him with quality lineups because every lineup that you're being shown is something that projects to be a profitable lineup. We can look individually at some of these. This one, 386% ownership. Again, that number is just going to be high because it's a 2-game slate. It's also a weird 2-game slate on DraftKings. Like, pricing is really, really tight on most teams. And then Golden State is just missing Steph Curry and Draymond Green. So they're shorthanded. And so this lineup, you have Shea at 33%, Clay at 61, 42% ownership coming into Wiggins, 75 to Scherer, who started last game and will most likely be in the starting lineup again tonight. 56 to Looney, who was benched last game, but will probably start in Draymond's place tonight. 86 to Paul. We have a relatively contrarian play in Duncan Robinson at 11%. And then we're rounding out with a 20% owned Jonathan Kuminga, who, again, on a 2-game slate, 20% is relatively low owned. It's just tough to get that contrarian. Now we're going to switch over to the FanDuel side and do the same thing over there. But before we do that, if you are looking to use this tool on your own, which I highly recommend, use the link below this video, whether you're watching it on YouTube, it's in the description, or on Twitter. I will tweet a link following the video. You can use it for $14.95 per week. It is the most cost-effective way to get access to our tools. Obviously, if you're interested, you can sign up for our data packages. You can sign up for our sim models. They're all going to be more expensive, and that doesn't make sense for everybody. It's great. I recommend it if it makes sense for you. But for a lot of players, if you're playing the $4.20 max on DraftKings, for example, that's $80. If you're spending $200 a month on a Sims package, no matter how good you are, no matter how good the Sims package is, no matter how much it helps you, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to turn a profit when you're outlaying that kind of money for tools, not to mention any other products that you're already paying for. So we kept that in mind when we created this tool. It's perfect for you if you're playing $4.20 max, single entry, 3 max, stuff like that, where you're not putting as much money into play necessarily, or you're not playing large field tournaments where you need 150 lineups, but you still are able to use ownership projections, the simulation models, and you're just getting the end result. It also limits your ability to screw yourself up because, like I said, there are customization options that I showed you, but you don't have to deal with a lot of the inputs that you do in, if you're just using our projections from scratch or using the Sims model from scratch. So it helps, kind of protect you there as well. Now we can look at the FanDuel side, going to go to contrarian lineups again. Not going to lock anybody. I'm going to take these first 20 lineups like I did on DraftKings. And obviously, the nice thing about playing, if you have the bankroll and the time, multiple sites is you are going to naturally be diversified a little bit. A couple of names at the top here on FanDuel, certainly the same as DraftKings with Chris Paul, Klay Thompson, and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. But then you get some different names just because pricing is different, roster construction is different, salary cap is different, all of that. So once again, we have 100% Chris Paul. We also have 100% Klay Thompson. Shooting guard, 5,800, just really tough to get away from that on a 2-game slate. Shea is once again showing up in 80% of lineups, so he's 55% owned over the field there. We have 45% Bam this time, which is pretty much in line with the field. Kenrich Williams is in 60% of our lineups. That looks like a contrarian play that is just showing up a ton for us right now on FanDuel, allowing us to be different. He is currently projected for 10% ownership. So this is a perfect example of Kenrich Williams is a good contrarian play. It's also still Kenrich Williams. So it would be completely reasonable to say, all right, Kenrich Williams is 10% owned. The first 20 lineups I clicked have 60% Kenrich Williams. I think 30% Kenrich Williams is enough, as far as my personal allocation goes. And so I'm just going to get rid of half the Kenrich Williams lineups. And you can do that easily the same way that I showed you on the DraftKings side. Jimmy Butler showing up 55%. He is getting 72% ownership on this slate. So while we do have a lot of Jimmy Butler, we're actually under the field. Josh Giddey, 50% of our lineups, he's 42% owned. Mikal Bridges, 44% owned in half of our lineups. Wiggins, we're a little under the field at 45%. He's getting 58% ownership. You have Bam, who I already mentioned. Kuminga is in 40% of our lineups. He is only showing up around 26% for the field. So that's another spot that we're being, looking to get a little bit different. We're a little under the field on Scherer here because very different price tag than DraftKings. We have him at 5,700. DraftKings, he was at 5,200. So a little bit more expensive here, but also just you have some other cheap options on FanDuel that you don't necessarily have on DraftKings. Kevon Looney not showing up as much as on DraftKings because you do only have the one center position. He's 5,900. The field is getting to him at 23%. We have 35%. So we're still over the field on Looney on FanDuel, even though we're not playing nearly as much as on DraftKings. And then we can look at one of these lineups. I want to see if we can find one that is significantly more contrarian than the rest. Most of these are in the same ballpark in terms of aggregate ownership. We can go down to this one. Looks like it was the 18th one that we generated. 285 fantasy points, 390% aggregate ownership. So you have Shea and Chris Paul at the top, two very, very popular clear-cut top point guard options. Spencer Dinwiddie, 47% owned. He is actually on our 47% owned. So we're not getting as much of him as the field. We are still obviously getting there some, though, 25%. So around half the field. Klay Thompson, pretty tough to get away from. We like Kuminga as a contrarian play. 12% ownership coming into Kenrich Williams. So as I mentioned before, 15.8 fantasy point projection. He doesn't project very well. He just projects to be different and a way to lower ownership. Not necessarily the kind of guy that you just want your entire night revolving around, but certainly a good contrarian option. Jimmy Butler showing up 72%. Only 18% ownership coming into a $4,400 Dorian Finney-Smith. That's like $1,000 less expensive than he is on DraftKings. Kind of an interesting play there, even though the playing time has been pretty suspect recently. And then we're rounding out with Chet Holmgren, which this is another case of he's 16% owned, so he's not contrarian in the sense that if Chet Holmgren has a good game, you're just by yourself at the top of tournaments. But he is contrarian in the sense that, for one, 85% of the field doesn't have him, but he's a center, and we're playing him at center. So if you have Chet Holmgren on FanDuel, by definition, you don't have 45% owned Bam Adebayo. You don't have 25% owned Kevon Looney. You're different already from a lot of the field in that way. So that's the lineup generator tool. It's a great tool. Highly recommend you use it. Again, link below in the description on YouTube. I'll tweet the link below on Twitter as well. $14.95 for a week. Best bang for your buck that you're going to get as far as getting access to our projections and models. Other than that, good luck on your lineups tonight, and I hope you enjoyed the video.